Yeah, like, okay, so the other day, I managed to be late to a podcast just because of who I am as a person. Like, I don't know, I had it down, like, at the wrong time.
Yeah.
So I was late, and I'm like, oh fuck, oh shit, oh fuck. But like, luckily it was Cleo, who we interviewed before. So I was like,
Mm-hmm.
well, at least it's a friend. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm like, and like the fancy podcasting suite or whatever that we're supposed to use, then decided that my version of Chrome was not compatible with it. So then I had to download a whole new Chrome
Yeah.
when I was already late, and I was like, I just fucking hate you.
So
So
wait, you have a podcasting cube?
and there's like a podcasting like app. It's like, well, I don't know, like no, maybe not
Oh,
app.
okay.
Like it's like a pod. No, I do not have a
I
podcasting
thought
queue.
no, I thought okay, so I thought you meant like History Hit had like a physical space
Oh
where
god,
they
no.
wanted you to come in and do all the podcasts because like I heard about this the other day, but like some places have like and I mean it's for like very famous people, but I was like I don't know, maybe they do it differently in Britain, but like some people have like just like podcasting cubes that they podcast from and people come by and they're like, "Hey," like
Yeah, I mean, like that. It definitely. We don't have one of those at History Hit, although
yeah.
that I'm aware of. Although, like,
Hmm.
my friends in the Trash Future universe have a studio.
That is wild.
Yeah, which is like, so I go over there a lot, like whenever I'm on, like, whenever I do Phoebe's podcasts or something. Like I go over there, which we use as an excuse to like go get dinner, or whatever. But it's like, it cracks me up because it's like they've got an office with like all just like the normal officey stuff on the ground floor. And then you go into the podcast dungeon below, which is quite funny, but it also cracks me up because like on the door outside it's got like the number of the road it is, and there is a little plaque that says like Trash Future, like a business. And it always makes me laugh. So
Is this like a shed? Like that's awesome.
yeah, like it's like a ground floor of a building and basement of a building. It's nice to do it, and I mean it's interesting when you go down there. You're like, oh yeah, the acoustics are fucking great here, but they make a lot more money than we do, so
Yeah.
so that'll do it.
Top?
Right?
Aren't they like top 10 or some shit? Jesus
Yeah,
Christ.
yeah, they got that office money, you know. But I go around there. They give me free shirts, so
Yeah. We just need top 10. Like yeah. I mean, we have like 430 something now, and I never thought it would get like
We're top
I
500,
remember,
baby.
yeah, well, I remember like when we started this, Amy was like, how many, patrons do you think you'd get? I'd be like, I don't know, like 100, 150 or something like that. And I was like, it wasn't that I thought like people wouldn't like it. It's just like,
It's
I
hard out
never
here.
thought this, but like, I can't even imagine, like, I cannot imagine having that many people paying me. Like,
Yeah,
to
yeah,
be able to just have like a full salary off of it, man.
yeah. I mean that'll always be the dream. I would really,
Yeah.
it'd be nice if I could concentrate more, But you know what? We out
Yeah.
here, right? So,
Yeah,
so
we could get, we could rent a podcasting booth directly between us. Just
yeah,
stick it
just out in the
somewhere
middle of the Atlantic.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, okay, because
Live from the Pod Dome.
well, like I went to go see the kids do Trash Future live last night, and Blair's like, "You and Luke should be doing live shows," and I was like, "Babe."
I mean,
And
I would love to do it.
I was
Don't
like,
get me wrong, but like,
how?
I guess we could. I guess like we could have scheduled something for when you were in America, and
Yeah,
I
but
could have,
even
flown
then,
to,
like,
Tacoma. I don't know.
Yeah, like I mean, it's like
SeaTac or some
like
shit?
do it in Tacoma. That's right.
Yeah.
We'll get all of Tacoma out for this shit.
I mean,
Hell
yeah.
yeah.
If I ever make it to England, hell yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, we'll
Could
do it.
that.
Yeah, if you ever come
People-
out,
Yeah,
we'll do a London one. Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we need to get the Trash Future people on here.
Yeah, we should.
Let's get
Yeah.
them on. Just be like, yeah, what are we talking about?
I'll just start rolling Alice through. I'm sure she's got something to say. It'll be fun.
Trash Future, medieval times.
That's right. Well, they have a whole bit about that called Midden's Advent.
I did not know that. I have had. I'm like subscribed to Trash Future on my pod app, but like, man, I'm so bad at starting new things. Like this is a recurring
yeah.
thing for me, but I'm just so bad at it. And it's like, I've heard all these people talk on different things. It's just like,
Well, the trouble is too, it's like how many hours in a day can you listen to podcasts, and I listen to a lot, but it's like, so I listen to, and the thing is I've got all these friends with podcasts, so I listen to my friends' ones so that like I'm a good and supportive friend, but then I've also got like Politics Theory Other, who are one of my real favorites and kind of like keep me up to like with the intellectual like leftism things. There are all these things that I'm trying to kind of cycle through. And it's tricky staying on top of everything because you also need the time, right? Like just the time to do it. And it's like, I can do it like while I'm making dinner or whatever else. Or like, when I'm doing my old people stuff, like gardening, I get a lot of podcasts in then, but otherwise I'm just fucking making them all the time.
Yeah. It's,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like it's wild. I mean, I love it. Don't get me wrong. And I really appreciate all the patrons and people,
Oh God. Yeah.
who sign up and everything. I just I can't imagine having like that big of an audience. Like the uptick in scale to me. I don't know. It's just like, I guess I would, I'd get used to it. I'm just like,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's daunting. Daunting is the word.
Yeah, it's quite funny. Like at the show last night, I'm like, I go get Alice after the show, and she's like, I better go help on merch. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just stand beside you, and like I'll be your kind of like creepy bodyguard. So if like people don't also pay you a compliment, they're not allowed to talk to you. And she's like, okay, good. So I'll do that. Like yes, now you may buy a shirt. Okay.
Where was the show at? I mean,
this place, it's called Between the Bridges. It's like down on the river here, kind of like near Waterloo Station. And it's like, it's like a tent event. I swear to fucking Christ. I was like, I went so rugged up, mate. I went so rugged up. It was fine. Like the last one I went to this summer, it was like this really wet day, and there was this huge fan that I was sitting right in front of, and I was so fucking cold the whole time. It was awful. So like, you wouldn't catch your girl slipping this time.
Not this time.
No.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. Let's
talk about the fucking Princess in the Tower, because I got a lot to say, dude.
Again.
No, I know.
All right. 3, 2, 1. Hello, and welcome back to We're Not So Different, a podcast about how we've always been idiots. My name is Luke Waters, and I am an amateurish historian, and as always, I am joined by Dr. Eleanor Yaniga, who is anything but.
That's right.
Great, yeah. Already got the sniffles. Wonderful. Oh, man. Yeah. So, today we are, we've got some medieval news. Actual breaking medieval news, sort of. In a way. Look, it's something, it's something to,
yeah.
It's medieval news. We're
going with it. We're going with it, babe.
Yeah. But before we get to breaking news, we just need to have, the news of the day. Yeah. We got a question from one of our patrons, Steph, who says, I was listening to a recent episode on mining, and Eleanor mentions how Romans used child labor for mining, the children yearned for the mines, etc. And this got me wondering on the role of children and child labor in medieval societies. I'd be really interested to learn about this outside of Europe as well.
Yeah, okay, so the answer is there is some.
Yeah.
Like that is one true thing. And one of the primary things that you got to understand, and I think that anyone who's grown up on a farm now knows, is that it's like, you got a strong back, we could use you, kind of a deal. So you get put to work pretty early in the medieval world anywhere around the world, and it's likely in an agrarian sense. So, at the big harvest festivals, there's going to be little jobs for you to do. Planting, kids can always help with that. Animal husbandry, even if it's just like feeding the chickens or feeding the cows and stuff like that, they're all going to be involved in that. And that gets started really quite early. because there's just a lot of work to do, isn't there, in terms of feeding people. And, you know, similarly, you know, chores and things like that will routinely be farmed out to children. In terms of like labor for the more specific skills markets, children are also more involved in this, and this is worldwide. In that, you know, when you get apprenticed to someone for a skill, you're often going off at like 10 or, you know, 12, something like that. So, and apprentices are, you know, you are being taught, but you're also working. So kids get sent away from home at a pretty young age in order to learn skills and crafts. And to work at difficult things like blacksmithing or leather making or, you know, forging or all of these things. Within Chinese society as well, which, you know, is what I kind of know most about in terms of medieval stuff outside of it, you then also will have people who get sent on to study for the scholars exams and then get sent on the scholars exams, and then you go become, you know, a cog for the state. At a pretty early age. So if you can read and write and things like that, you, again, will very routinely get sent out at like 14. You know? So there's just a real different way of looking at it. You know, people are still considered children, certainly, and they're considered to be not fully formed. But part of that usually means that it's understood that they're going to be like learning on the job.
Right.
So we just absolutely know for a fact that, yeah, there's kids down the mines. You know, like it's probably not going to be 8-year-olds, but it's absolutely going to be like 12-year-olds, you know, 14-year-olds, things like that. Yeah, absolutely. And there's definitely going to be kids who are refining the mining products and who are working in as blacksmiths and, you know, all of these things. So work just comes to you much earlier.
Working in conditions and jobs that we would find appalling, like even outside of farm labor, because I mean, like to an extent, like you can understand like why like a 10-year-old is milking cows or whatever, because that's what you got to do. But like, you know, they were also like, okay, time to inhale coal fumes from the blacksmith's kiln for 13 hours, you know, a day when you're 8 years old. And it's like, well, Billy died at 14. Like, yeah, I wonder why, man.
You're like, don't fucking burn your fingers off in the glory hole down the glass blowers, you know, like, you know, stuff like this. Yeah. Yeah. That's very real.
Yeah. Yeah. They had a different concept of what child labor is than we do. And, you know, different concept of, you know, the superstructure and the mode of production called for a different thing at the time. And that doesn't make it good, but that, you know, is what they had.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
So, yeah. Steph, thank you so much for the question. And if you would like to ask us questions like this that we discuss here on the show, then please do subscribe to the Patreon, patreon.com/WNSDpod. You get access to all of these episodes ad-free. We got 50 bonus episodes. We got a new one coming this Friday on an intro to the Star Wars TV show Andor. And if you're wondering why we're doing that, well, you know,
shut up.
I get to pick for once. Yeah, shut up. I get to pick for once.
Mom said it's Luke's turn, you know?
Yeah, me standing in the hallway. Mom said you had to play a podcast that's 2-player. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, so check that out. Give us some money. It is great. It helps us out, and we really do appreciate it. Yeah, so anyway, on to the main show. So like I said, we got breaking news of the medieval variety. Let's have a party. Woo! You know, everybody get out your loot and
I'm getting the hurdy-gurdy.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, and drink your beer that would probably taste very weird to anyway, you know what to do. Just get out, you know, whatever you're doing, whatever medieval thing. You know, you'll forgive us because we rarely get to celebrate real medieval news on this medieval history podcast. The era has been over for anywhere from 500 to 570 years, depending on what dates you use. And so most of the news from this time is already well known and truly broken. No one is getting shocked if you announce that Genghis Khan and his Mongol army is invading Europe or the Ottomans finally breached the Theodosian walls of Constantinople. They already know that shit. or they should. But if it's your first time learning that, then I can see how that would be exciting to you. Anyway, but the past couple of weeks have been a bit different because historian Philippa Langley has a new TV special out that details her completely new-ish theory on the fates of the deposed King Edward V and his younger brother Richard of Shrewsbury, aka the Princes in the Tower. Langley made headlines in 2012 for the discovery of the remains of the king who locked the princes away, Richard III, under a parking lot, an assertion that was confirmed using DNA evidence. But Langley's new theory, that the princes survived and fled, threatens to upend the presumed fate of the princes, which has been the consensus of the public and historians for more than 500 years. This new theory was put forward in a televised special that appeared on Channel 4 in England entitled Princes in the Tower, The New Evidence. In case you don't recall our recent series on the Wars of the Roses, here's a brief refresher on the consensus view of the fates of the princes. Following England's humiliating defeat at the hands of the French in the 100 Years' War, the island descended into a civil war between Yorkist and Lancastrian factions known as the Wars of the Roses. The wars began in 1455 and continued intermittently for the better part of the next 3 decades, with the Yorkists nearly claiming total victory through Richard of York in 1483. In April of that year, King Edward IV, a Lancastrian, died of natural causes while held in the custody of Richard of York, who was acting as regent and lord protector of the realm at the time. Edward IV's oldest son, the 12-year-old confusingly named Edward, get a new name, guys, was named King Edward V, and in May took his customary place in the Tower of London to await his coronation. Instead, Richard of York, who was also the uncle of the princes, had 9-year-old Richard of Shrewsbury detained and locked in the Tower as well, alongside his brother, in June. Edward V's coronation was indefinitely postponed, and then in July, Richard of York enacted his coup, having himself crowned King Richard III. The people seem to largely acquiesce to this, as having an unlikable boy king was considered suboptimal. However, this is where Richard really fucked himself and the Yorkist faction over, because the public began to see the princes less and less over time until they were never seen again. This, along with Richard's seizure of power, led the English people, the nobility, and basically every historian since that time to presume that the princes had been murdered on Richard III's orders, likely in September, though no confirmed bodies have ever been found. The purported deaths of the princes in the Tower led to outrage against Richard and a coalition formed behind the exiled Henry Tudor, who swept in, defeated Richard's army at the Battle of Bosworth Field, and took the throne for himself in 1485. However, rumors of the survival of the princes have existed since the time of their disappearance, most notably 2 imposters, Lambert Simnel and Perkin Warbeck. God, those are 2 English names. Each of whom was purported to be the real Richard of Shrewsbury, who escaped the Tower, led separate unsuccessful campaigns to take back the throne from Henry Tudor in 1487 and 1491, respectively. Both were summarily defeated, and no one actually believes either was the real Richard of Shrewsbury. But what Philippa Langley suggests is that the princes weren't actually executed and were instead secreted away from the Tower and to the continent, where they were cared for by sympathetic friends and allies until they got older, and then led a unsuccessful campaign to retake the throne. If this is correct, it would mean that there were 3 unsuccessful attempts to take back the crown in the name of the princes, 2 imposters and a real one. So it's not so much news that this happened, because it had already happened twice. It's news that, if true, the princes did survive and there was a 3rd real failed attempt after the first 2 were fakes. Look, we take our medieval news how we can get it. We don't want to hear it. Whew, yeah, so yeah, that's the Princes in a Tower in the Princes in the Tower for Dummies. Yeah, so Eleanor, before we get on to the veracity, your opinion on the veracity of these claims by Philippa Langley, let's look at her contentions and the evidence that exists for both sides of the debate. We'll start with Langley's new theory of events and the evidence she puts forth in support, before turning to the evidence of the established side, which claimed, as we said, Richard III had the princes in the Tower murdered in 1483. So, in Langley's version, what ultimately happened to the princes? How did they escape imprisonment, and what were their eventual fates?
So one of the things that's fairly annoying about this version is that we've got a lot on Richard, but not a lot on Edward. for this. So one thing is there is a receipt. She's got a receipt.
A singular receipt.
There is a receipt. I have the receipt. Okay, so there's a receipt. And it purports to be Margaret of Burgundy, she's one of the Yorks, and she's been married off to Burgundy now, which, nice job. Like, that's a lot of money. Well done. And she says that she's buying 400 pikes for people to send with her nephew, the King of England's son, over to England. It says this on the receipt. And it's to King of the Romans, Maximilian. Which, okay. And we're guessing, it doesn't name names, but like based on dates, the argument is that would be Edward. Yeah. Then there is another argument, and my boy Matt Lewis, my co-host on Gone Medieval, he's got a book coming out about this. I want to read Matt's book. All right, I'm just saying. So the next thing is that in 1487 there is an attempt of the Yorkists to invade from Dublin, and first, one of the things that happens is there's a coronation ceremony in Dublin, and at which people are saying, this is Edward and we're crowning him and he's the King of England happens. Then they invade, and you have the Battle of Stoke, and everyone gets fucking killed, right?
Yeah.
So I guess the theory here is that Edward was then killed at the Battle of Stoke.
But wasn't the Battle of Stoke, wasn't that part of the Lambert Simnel thing?
Yeah. Okay. So this is the thing. So what they're saying.
Ahead,
so
sorry,
okay. Yeah. I mean, you are quite right. Okay. So, and what they're saying...
Hey, I learned something. Yeah.
You did it. You did it. So, and what they're saying is that the whole Lambert Simnel thing is a red herring and an attempt on the part of the Tudors to say that all of these people were following Lambert Simnel, but they weren't following Lambert Simnel. They were following Edward V, who had been crowned, and then like everything was destroyed. And I'm like, okay.
So
you know what? We'll get that. That's it. You ask.
Ahead.
You ask.
No, I did. No, and I want to know. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I mean, I find this difficult, right? Because my thing is, I'm like, why don't we have any other records about this? Like, why don't we have? Why isn't there anything in Ireland on this? Like, why don't we have more records about that? Like, why isn't there more extensive, why don't we have something from Margaret of Burgundy being like, my nephew got crowned, or like going to my nephew's coronation, or like sending stuff to my, we got these receipts out here. And the idea here then is that the Tudors then put forward the Lambert Simnel thing to be like, here's a red herring. And then like Edward got himself killed at the Battle of Stoke. And so they were able to be like, say no more, say no more. Because if you then say, oh, and we killed Edward at the Battle of Stoke, then that opens the door for Richard. Now.
But I'm sorry, let me ask a question. But
go for it.
If you were them, wouldn't you want to announce that you had the real Edward? Like, announce that far and wide? Because you've already seen the revolt that cropped up to kick Richard III off the throne for supposedly killing the princes. So if you have one of the princes alive, wouldn't you be like, hey, he was crowned in Dublin. Hey, coronation over. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, like you would think that is the thing, is that you would think that they would do more of a job of yelling. Yeah. You would think that there would be perhaps, I don't know, missives sent out to other courts, things of this nature, to say that this is what's going on. So I find this a little bit difficult to believe. But one of the things within this too is that we don't know anything other than that in this story, right? We have absolutely fucking nothing other than this receipt, this coronation, and we're kind of filling in the blanks there. We don't know how he got where he got. We don't know like how he got to the continent. Anything like that. Anything like that. So I mean,
So that's
maybe it's just like
ahead.
an incredible lacuna around like a bid for the throne. But if this is like a real, I just feel like we would have more information.
Yeah,
I don't know.
that seems like something they would do, especially since the Lambert, Simnel, and Perkin Warbeck things are very well-known pieces of historical ephemera. Like, you would think that someone claiming to be the real prince would have also made waves, especially if they were trying to turn the Lambert Simnel thing into a two-front war coming from the north and from France. So it's like, yeah. So, okay, so that's Edward.
That's Edward.
Okay, so what about Richie? What about younger brother Richard?
So Richard, there's more and interesting evidence for, I'd say. So one thing is a document that is written in the first person in Middle Dutch. We think it must be a translation, likely from Latin or possibly French or something. And it purports to be a statement that Richard says, "This is what happens to me." Okay. And he says, I was in the Tower of London with my brother Edward. I was then separated from him and taken down into a cell where the lions were. And then Henry and Thomas Percy, who are two people from who we are known courtiers, find him, say like, we're gonna save you. They shave his head, put him in poor people's clothes. And they sail off to the continent. And there's a lot of bouncing around. They go to France. He travels extensively. He goes to Portugal. In Portugal, Henry Percy dies. Then Henry Percy says, "You've got to go to Ireland." Everyone in Ireland is like, "Oh, hey, look, it's Richard, the Duke of York. We definitely know that." And then he goes to link up with Margaret, the Duchess of Burgundy, his aunt. And he's like, and now I'm going to amass my army and go take my birthright, which is England. Right. And that's what the document says. Now, I find this interesting. I definitely find it really interesting. And, it's kind of like from the hand is right. Apparently it's got like a watermark, like all of this. I think it's a little pat. They're like, oh,
Right.
It's got so much detail. Like Philippa Langley's argument here is, oh, it's got so much detail. You wouldn't just make that up. You wouldn't just make that up because, like, you would need because you'll get caught out in a lie. Like, you would, and I'm like, but you absolutely need to have that level of detail if you are making a claim that you're Richard, the Duke of York, and trying to explain where the fuck you've been. You're going to need that level of detail. And all it really takes is the name of a couple of courtiers. Like, I don't know. It's very young Griff, the whole thing, to me.
Yeah.
It's like the thing. Like, with the moving around and the and the courtiers true to the cause, but then they die and all of this. I'm just like, okay.
Yeah.
Then there is another thing where this Richard then presents himself to Maximilian, Holy Roman Emperor. And he's like, I proved that I'm Richard, Duke of York, because I have these 3 birthmarks, one under my eye, one by my lip, and one on my leg, I think it was. And then only I could have these birthmarks, and that's how it proves how it is. And I'm like, okay, how does the Emperor Maximilian know about your birthmarks?
Yeah. Is that a purported thing? Like you... Like how when they rip when Krusty comes back to Camp Krusty and they rip open his shirt and they're like, oh, his well-known superfluous third nipple. Like, is that something that everybody knows about?
Well, I mean, that's my thing, because like, really, I mean, if you're scamming, you could just go up and be like, and everybody knows I have these 3 birthmarks, and I'm like, do we?
Is that
is that a known thing? And I'm like, well, and why would your aunt who lives in Burgundy know about these things? Why would the Emperor Maximilian? Yeah. So it's an actually really interesting little thing where you can be like, oh, here's the evidence, and people go, yes.
Why would one of the most powerful rulers in the world at the time know about the birthmarks of a deposed prince from, at that time, still backwater England? That seems, I don't know, man.
I mean, it seems like, I mean, to me, it seems like a nice little flourish if you're scamming, but like, whatever, right? Another thing that they have which is a really cool document, is a deed where Richard has a seal where it's like, it shows him as king of England. And, you know, like, and I don't know, Philippa is just like absolutely rubbing herself raw at this point. Good for her. She's so excited about the seal. Like, look, he's saying he's king. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's what people do, but all right. And he's saying that he pledges 30,000 florins to pay Duke Albert of Saxony if Duke Albert of Saxony supports him in taking the English throne, and he'll pay them that money back, right? And then, hilariously, a bunch of people who are not historians are like, what about that signature? Do you think that signature says anything? I'm like, why would anyone know what Richard's signature is? And then, like, and the real historian there is like, well, it's a pretty confident signature, which is like someone who's good with a quill. And then, like, the non-historians are like, oh, it's a confident signature. So that means he's confident about, and I'm like, that's not what confident means.
Just means the person didn't have to double up when drawing the signature.
So,
like you would do if you naturally wrote your own signature, or if you were good at forging them. One of the two, probably.
Yeah. So, you know, you've got this thing, right? So they're like, oh my God, a seal that shows him as king. Like, of course you're going to buy one of those.
Yeah.
Like, and that's fine. And then here the argument too becomes like, oh, they're spending like absolutely tons of money on, like, people are spending tons of money on supporting Richard's bid for the throne, and they wouldn't do that unless they thought that he really was a royal. And I'm like, I mean, they might if they thought they would win.
They did it with people threw money at Perkin Warbeck, and nobody at the time even thought he was actually the, like.
I mean, it's just like, well, yeah, this is the thing, right? So this is all in theory happening to Perkin Warbeck, and their argument is that Perkin Warbeck absolutely is Richard. Okay.
Wait, that's her argument?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Oh, sorry. I should have, like, yeah, I should have.
No, yeah. I didn't know. Okay, so I have purposefully, like, I heard I heard the news, I read a couple things, but then I was like, I'm going to purposefully, like, ignore a lot of this, because number one, there's no way I'm reading everything, like, between now and then, like, it's just not going to happen. And I was like, you know, I'll be able to talk to Eleanor. So they're saying that that Richard was actually Perkin Warbeck.
Yeah, like that's definitely Richard, and you can tell because he's got the seal. His aunt thinks it's him. He showed these birthmarks to Maximilian. And here's my deal, right? And they're like, oh yeah, and you wouldn't spend all of this money on someone if he wasn't definitely a royal. And I'm like, I mean, you might if you thought you were going to get 30,000 florins in exchange.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, why does the Duke of Saxony care if it's actually the King of England? Like, this is a way of making money. Now, like, I can see the argument from Margaret's side more often that she wouldn't put forward a pretender. Yeah. On the other hand, I could also just see her being petty because she's cool. I really like Margaret of Burgundy. Yeah. I think she's cool as hell. So, like, maybe she's just being petty. Maybe she does think that's her nephew. Like, I don't know. But I don't think that rich people spending a lot of money trying to topple the kind of new King of England because they wouldn't do that unless he was royal. I don't find that a convincing argument because rich people do crazy stuff all the time in order to make some money.
French people have been doing that since 1066. That's how you got England in the first place.
This is what Burgundians do. Like, I don't know if you've been paying attention to the 100 Years' War, but they do rather a lot of just throwing money at varying people and seeing what happens. But anyway, this Richard has a fleet. Henry VII, meanwhile, finds out that he's got the fleet, so they kind of like move him all around like the Dutch coast. You get a failed invasion in 1495 where King James I of Scotland then takes him in. Says, like, yep, you look like Richard the Duke of York to me. And, like, marries him off and all this stuff. And then they're like, oh, see, so King James, like, accepts him as a king. And I'm like, yeah, but again, this is Scottish people, you know, fucking with
Scottish who've always historically been friendly with the English.
Yeah, I mean, like it's to me that doesn't say much. Okay, so then you got a couple of failed invasions. Then Richard gets taken to the Tower, and Henry gets him to sign this confession that he's Perkin Warbeck, right? And it's a pre-made confession. It's like, and it's basically like, sign this, and you know you will get to ponce around court. We're going to treat you real nice, and whatever else. And now here is kind of like the thing. It's like his wife doesn't divorce him, and they're like, oh, see, and you're allowed to divorce people if it's found out they're fraud. And I'm like, well, I don't know, man. Like, maybe she's just rolling the dice and she don't care. All of these things. And then Perkin it then escapes, gets captured, sent back to the tower, tortured, and then he's charged with treason and executed by hanging. The execution by hanging is made much of because they're like, well, ordinarily you would hang, draw, and quarter someone who's buying by treason, so you can tell that he's a royal because they didn't do that. I think that Edward VII is a real piece of shit. And I don't know why he wouldn't hang, draw, and quarter you one way or another. The fact that he treats Perkin Warbeck pretty well is an interesting one. And so part of the argument here is that they say the reason he treats Perkin Warbeck well is because he knows that he really is Richard, and he doesn't want to piss everyone on the continent off and be like, we killed your relative. But I would think that it would still piss everyone on the continent off if you were like, he's not, he's an imposter, like... I don't know. So I find all of that like quite confusing. Like just to me, I'm sort of like, this gives a lot of like really good color to the Perkin Warbeck story. I find this stuff more interesting than I find like the theoretical stuff about Edward.
Yeah.
One way or another. But like, that's it. This is the evidence that they're working with. Now, I don't know, because as I say, I haven't read it yet. Matt sent me over a copy of it. Matt's got a new book coming out. And Matt is a trained historian. Like, and I don't want to be a dick here. I really don't want to be a dick, okay? But the thing about Philippa Langley is that she is not trained. She's very enthusiastic. It's super cool how involved she was in finding Richard III and everything. Like, you know, she accomplished something there for sure. But there are lots of ways to interpret this information, I think. And, you know, like, also, I think that... yeah, like, there are ways that all of this can be explained. And, you know, I'm not exactly Team Tudor. Like, I don't really necessarily care whether Richard III killed the princes, right? So, like, it just doesn't, it's not keeping me up at night one way or another. I don't feel the need to exonerate him, but I also, like, don't feel the need to damn him either, because, like, obviously the Tudors did a huge hatchet job on him.
Yeah.
And said that he was evil or whatever, but yeah.
They did a huge hatchet job on everyone that, you know, that they didn't like. They were like, yep, terrible, awful.
Yeah, whatever. So I just kind of feel like there's, and I also think, you know, that there's also something going on here where after Philippa Langley made this huge big discovery of finding Richard in the car park and everything, good for her. I think there's pressure on her. She's got to have another bombshell, right? And it's like a real unhistorian like way of looking at things. You know, the like, oh, the history is these big bombshells and this changes everything. And like, you know, it's cool that we found Richard III in a car park. Does it change anything? No.
Yeah.
Right. And, you know, and I think that she's really trying to have another big discovery, and she wants something like really razzle dazzle. So I am interested to see what Matt has to say about it. You know, maybe when Matt's book comes out, we'll drag him on here. But because I said this to Matt, I was like, I don't know, I'm not sure I find any of this particularly convincing, and I want like information from somebody who's trained and who's like, yeah, well, check out my book. But you know, one of the things that he also said, and I think this is correct, is in order like to accept this narrative, you have to at least be open-minded to the fact that they could have survived. Right. And I do think it's possible that they could have survived, because, you know, we don't, you know, like, we don't have a lot of evidence that they died either. Let's just say that, you know?
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, that's the evidence that Langley has, or that we've seen so far. But now let's talk about just the evidence that there is for the consensus opinion, which, you know, as I said, Richard III had young Edward V and Richard Shrewsbury killed sometime later in 1483.
Yeah, so first of all, you've got the physical evidence, which is there was some work being done in the tower. A staircase was being taken out, and they found two small skeletons of children whose ages kind of seem to line up with those of the princes in the 17th century, so in 1674. They were then immediately dubbed Edward and Richard, and they were reburied with all honors. Okay. And there hasn't been any DNA testing on them because, calm down.
Yeah,
like
it's the bones of children. Worst case scenario, you got the wrong bones, but like,
yeah, like who is it? It's just it's seen as so. For example, it's very specifically Lizzie, R.I.P. Queenie, was like, no, please do not fiddle with these children's skeletons. Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
was kind of like one big thing, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, and what purpose does it serve other than like us scratching an itch about true crime, right?
Yeah.
So we have these two skeletons, but they haven't been tested. And I don't know, mate. There's like a lot of bones in the Tower of London. This is one thing that I would say, in that maybe it's not like maybe they didn't die. I think it's like, brah, we do be finding bones in the Tower of London. It's been continuously inhabited for quite some time, right?
I think it would actually probably be more unlikely that these two bodies are actually the princes. Like if they finally got the DNA test or whatever, and it was like they are the princes, it'd be like, well, that is extremely unlikely. But hey, good. Wow, you find a needle and a stack of needles every once in a while, I guess.
Yeah, like that's the thing is I don't think those are the skeletons of the princes personally. So right, I will say that I don't think that's them.
And I think I saw that Langley is trying to is once again being like, hey, DNA test those kids. I don't know if if Charles has a different response to than his mom did, but that's
might do. I mean, I think it could be interesting.
Yeah,
I think that though, like she's pushing because like in the same way that I think that she's probably right. I think it's not them, but anyway.
Yeah.
I think there's a real desire for it to be them because everyone feels bad about it, right? The other thing that we have is a fairly contemporary account, which is comes from your boy there, Thomas More. I always forget all the fucking Thomases. Like, is it Cromwell or More? One of the fucking Thomases that surrounding Henry VIII, who says, and they were smothered in their sleep by these guys in the tower on the orders of Richard III. Now, the argument against that is it's like, well, it was kind of like 50 years later.
It was Thomas More, by the way.
Oh, yeah, it was Thomas More. Thank you.
I just saw it on Wikipedia. Nope, go ahead.
Cheers. Okay. I was right the first. I shouldn't second guess myself. Yeah, so it was Thomas More. I just need to be like confident about shit. So the argument against this is it's 50 years later. What the fuck does he know? And I'm like, well, 50 years is like within living memory. It's not that. Right. Like, I mean, if people could get told things. It's not. Yeah. It's definitely hearsay. On the other hand, it is coming out of the Tudor court, so
Yeah.
Like, of course, Tudors want to tell you that Richard III had his niece and his nephews killed, right? And then also, the thing on this is it's just like this is, for better or worse, and they point this out very well in the show, and I think that they are correct here. This is the story you get told in the UK. The UK, for whatever fucking reason, is incredibly pro-Tudor. As Phoebe told us the other day when she came on, like this is one of the things that you learn about all the time. And like the Tudor historiography is just what is imparted onto people. And in general, this has just kind of been the agreed upon story is that Richard had them offed. Right. And I mean, you can see why also, because I think there's a little bit of, and I use this in a derogative sense, common sense about this, where it's like, well, wouldn't you if you wanted to be king?
Yeah.
Like, who's going to stop you?
If you're already there, like, Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like, if you're going, logically, if you're going to become king, and you're going to take the throne from someone, and there is an existing set of heirs, there's one thing that happens to those people throughout all of history.
Yep.
Ancient era, Middle Ages, modern era, doesn't matter. They get killed.
Yep.
That's how it is. Every time. So why would this one time be different?
Yeah, and it's
unless
like
they escaped early. Yeah, like yeah.
And it's funny because like my colleague and someone whose opinion I really respect, Yanina Ramirez, she's in this documentary and she's like, but I think she says something kind of silly where she's like, "It's a Catholic country, you wouldn't murder children," and I'm like, "Girl." Like,
I'm sorry, what?
I got some news for you about Catholics and also just like about kings and what they do. Kings do fucked up shit all the time. And like it doesn't matter.
You mean the Catholic Church that has been running a worldwide pedophilia ring for hundreds of years?
Yeah.
That Catholic Church?
I know, right? And I'm like, suddenly they care about kids. Okay. Now, having said that, like again, I think that Yanina is a really good scholar.
Yeah,
I absolutely respect her work and everything. I just think that I'm like, it's a little simplistic, but it's TV. Sometimes they get us to say really simplistic things.
Yeah.
That's something to keep in mind too, is like when you do be doing TV, sometimes they make you dumb it down a stitch. And, it's happened to the best of us. Right. Mm-hmm. So, and which is to say that Yanina is the best of us. So it's okay. What I would say is that I think that these new findings certainly muddy the waters a little bit. Mm-hmm. But like some of them to me are just not a smoking gun, right? Like, yeah.
I mean, so like, yeah, we've kind of talked about it a little bit here, but like, based on what you know right now, obviously you haven't read Matt's book or anything like that, but based on what you know right now, like what, like, is any of this evidence, does it seem like, remotely true and on point or like, we're just kind of like, well, there was a guy over here and somebody wrote something maybe, and yeah.
I think that it makes at the very least, I'm like, it makes the whole Perkin Warbeck thing more understandable to me.
Right.
I'm like, okay, well, like he's talking a real good game,
and how he survived like for like 6 years after declaring himself, like
yeah, like so, and I do think that complicates that narrative a bit. I find the Edward stuff flimsy, but again, it's because there's just so little. There's so little there. We've got a receipt and a theoretical coronation, which we don't really have very much documentation on.
Right.
And so this is like the Lambert Simnel is running cover for Edward, who was alive and was crowned, like as a theory. Mm-hmm. I just want to see more evidence about that. I just I feel like sure, maybe, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. But that seems like pretty weak to me, especially because there isn't anything else. At least with the stuff about the theoretical Richard, whether or not he's Perkin Warbeck. At least here we have like a story, which is like, here's how I left the tower. Here's where I was. Here are all these things. Like, at least there's a narrative there. Whether or not I am going along with it, I do not know. But at least, there's something to kind of hang things on. Right?
Right.
Whereas I just feel like the stuff around Edward, it's just so fill in the blank. It's so like...
Yeah.
There's very little to work with there, documentation-wise. Yeah.
Now, okay, let's just assume that what she said, what Langley says is fully correct for a second. Mm-hmm. If that is true, what does it change about anything?
This is my thing. It doesn't fucking change anything.
Yeah.
And this is my thing about both this and finding Richard III in the car park. It's nice, but as far as I'm concerned, it's effluvia, right? Like, it doesn't, this is me being a snobby historian, right? Which is where I'm like, yeah, but what does that mean? It doesn't change our understanding of what happened. Like the Tudors were still on the throne. It doesn't, and unless you have a like baby's first book of Tudor history understanding of the Tudors, they're bad people.
Yeah.
Like pretty famously awful, evil people. Like all of them. Edward VII, Henry VIII, Henry VIII, Elizabeth I, all just dog shit people who were really fully evil, right? And so it's like, it doesn't make me think of the Tudors as any more scheming or nefarious, because I'm hardly able to think of the Tudors as any more scheming or nefarious, right? It doesn't change anything, because fundamentally they were on the throne and they are on the throne, right?
Yeah.
So it's more like a sideshow. It's like, oh, that's quite interesting. And I also don't think that it does the thing that I know Philippa Langley wants to do here, which is kind of like perhaps exonerate Richard III of their deaths. And
right.
Here's my argument about that. This story, if we take this is definitely Richard and it's not Perkin Warbeck's story into account, he still imprisoned his nephews, and they had to be smuggled out and hidden and constantly on the move.
Yeah.
These do not sound like the actions of a man who's like, I intend to treat my nephews very well, and they will be treated like the little former princes they were. Because like there is the whole thing about how they were like bastardized, but then like the thing, or like it does not sound to me like throwing those kids in jail is what you do. And then they also make a little bit of a thing where they're like, oh, and then when they're rebastardized, like unbastardized, he goes and looks for them, and you wouldn't look for them if you killed them. And I'm like, yeah, you would if you were trying to throw people off.
Yeah, like, if you got the sense that the public was turning against you, that's the most obvious thing to do. Oh, just kidding. They were actually real. Also, I'm going on a fact-finding mission. Look at me.
Exactly. Like, I will not rest until, I find my nephews. And fundamentally, what I will say about it is this, which is kind of what I've said before, is like, it doesn't matter whether or not he killed them if they died, because he was responsible for them. So ultimately, it's his fault. Similarly, these do not sound like the actions of someone who had his nephew's best interests at heart. How the fuck you lose your nephews? Like, oopsie, couldn't find my nephews because I had them locked up in the fucking Tower of London, which is absolutely a prison, and they went AWOL.
How did you lose them from like this ultra secure place? Like,
it does not smack of like a guy who was like treating his nephews real kind and nice.
Yeah, the like exoneration of Richard III thing, like, I mean, I guess, but like, what are you exonerating? Like,
and this is something that I don't quite understand. I don't share this, I do not share this idealization of historical figures. I do not have the desire to let everybody know that a king is a good person. No, he wasn't. Like, there is no king in medieval Europe, even the ones I like, who are good people, right?
Yeah.
Because by virtue of being king, you're a bad person. It's like how there's no good billionaires. Like, you can't become a billionaire without, like, stealing wages and stealing taxes that you don't pay and oppressing people. You cannot become a king without stealing money off of people, oppressing people, killing people all the time for no good goddamn reason. And like that, it just is how it is. I don't care if you are Richard III or you're my boy Charles IV. He's a bad guy too, right? He was just good at playing the game. So I don't feel the need to crawl through history and go, oh, he wasn't that bad actually. Right?
Yeah.
And I don't really know that this gives us any new way to look at Richard III. And I don't think that it gives us any new way to look at Henry VII. Like, I don't really understand what it is I'm supposed to be changing my opinion on here,
Yeah, like, I don't...
And I'm Team York. I'm Team York.
Like, history's already rendered its judgment on Richard of York, and I'm not saying that to be like you shouldn't investigate it at all, but like... No. If all your thing here is just like reclaiming this guy's like legacy or whatever you want to call it, like, man, I guess, but like it's way cooler to me if you're just like, I think Perkin Warbeck is neat and I wanted to do this, and it's like, Yeah, okay, I get that because I think because Perkin Warbeck and Lambert Simnel are both very interesting for like
Yes.
various
Yeah.
reasons, but like it's really cool that there were actually fake or I guess possibly real ones uh who did this, and it's like okay, well we've got that, and we know that they are like we know that these things happened, and we know what happened to Simnel and Warbeck. And you know, in case you don't remember, everybody just kind of believed that Lambert Simnel was like a dupe, and he lived out the rest of his life as like a cook or
Yeah, yeah, yeah. In the
something
kitchens.
in the
Yeah.
king's castle or whatever. But like, if you say that, cool, like that is much more like that makes way more sense to me than being like this king of England was good. Like, I mean, okay, he was good, and the Tudors usurped the throne and were bad people. It's like,
Duh.
okay, yeah, like, yeah, I guess, but like, I don't even like. It would be one thing if like this was Richard's only crime. If like
Yeah.
everyone else was like, oh, he's a spotless guy, but that's not how it is. Like he stepped over like one of his brothers to get on the, like to become Lord Protector and all and Regent and all this sort of stuff. And I mean, like, if you are a believer in the English monarchy as an institution, which I'm obviously not, but if you are, then Richard III, at the time, Richard of York, violated his rights and duties as the Lord Regent or as the Regent and Lord Protector for those boys when he did this. Like,
Yep.
it's an abdication of those duties too, in order to usurp the throne. So he already usurped the throne to do this in the first place, and you're just like, well, but he didn't kill him. It's like, okay.
Okay.
They got killed later because they tried to like they had to live in like poverty and exile. Maybe not poverty, but they had to live in exile and run for their lives. Like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, either way, if we accept like this framing, they both end up dead anyway, like at the hands of the Tudors, and so it doesn't really matter because the Tudors remain on the throne.
We chalked two more like royal bodies up to the Tudors in addition to Richard III and whoever else, you know, after that. And it's like, okay, cool. Well, there's that now.
Yeah. I mean, I
like
suppose maybe it's nice to complicate the stories that we tell about the Tudors here. I enjoy doing that. And like, yeah, if we can trouble the easy narratives about like the Tudors are cool, that's good. But also, if you're coming away from learning about them as like, oh yeah, these guys are fucking great, like I don't really know what to say to you.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I don't think it is like changing a ton of minds. And even if it, like, if you say this to me, it's like, okay, well, you know, Richard is still like Richard. Like he's remembered as a villain now, and like maybe the best that this can do is remember him as like an unlucky guy. But it's like, you're like, all you're doing there is just trying to change the judgment of history, like because you happen to like this guy or you have an attachment to him because you found him in a supermarket parking lot. Which, hey,
cool.
I'm going to be completely honest. If I had found Richard III in a supermarket parking lot, I would probably be like, I would probably know a whole fucking lot about him. But like, it's just like, if you're right, all it does is change one footnote in history. Wars of the I don't know. I'm not trying to sound anti-scholarship or anything, because obviously that's good, and she has, for the record, made at least one, if not more, historical discoveries than I ever have and probably ever will. But
I just feel like she wants it to happen too bad. It seems to me like she's made the decision and worked backwards is kind of how it comes across to me.
Something that does really frustrate me about historians, both popular and academic, is like this thing where it's like, okay, I'm going to come up with some harebrained theory and like write a book about it, and the theory's based on like, yeah, you know, you could kind of read the evidence this way or that way or whatever, and it's like, and then for some reason, when it comes to history, people are like, oh, well, this new scholarship says, and it's like, if I come up with new scholarship that says gravity isn't real, no one's going to take that seriously. If I come up with new scholarship and say the dinosaur bones that we found are actually the bones of giants, no one is going to take that seriously. But if I have like PhD after my name, or I have written a few books, and I'm like, Gustavus Adolphus was a shitty military commander. You know, like you can, like, there are enough people who would just be like, oh yeah, totally. Yeah. I've always thought he fucking sucked. Like, yeah. And you're just like, okay. And like,
yeah, I mean,
and it really bothers me in one specific instance, because like you see all this stuff and it's like, Ridley Scott is like antagonizing historians about Napoleon. Yes. Napoleon does not look great. Also, yes. But I just find it so weird that like historians get on this high horse, and I'm like, man, you are the ones that are like coming out here and being like, yeah, the Henry Tudor was actually a crofter's son, or so, you know, and it's just like I mean, obviously like there are tons of, I'm sure, great reasons why the historical inaccuracies in Napoleon are bad, but like the contrarianness that historians have, and they'll just be like, oh yeah, this kind of happened, and you're just like, based on what, man? That like based, like, what is the basis of this? And a lot of times it's like this with her and Richard III is, she likes Richard III. So she therefore dislikes the Tudors. So therefore, like this, and it, like, yeah, it just, it's so annoying. Like, it really does annoy the shit out of me.
It's an interesting one, this. And I mean,
and I'm not talking about you, and I'm not talking about like historians I'm just saying for everyone. Like, I'm not, but like, it like is baffling to me. I'm just like, where the fuck does this come from? I read something the other day that was talking about how there was no such thing as tulip mania, the Dutch craze that's supposed to be the big, like, first big speculative market. And it's like,
don't take this away from me.
It's overblown.
Don't take it away from me. I want it.
Yeah, number one, don't take it away from me. Number two, like, okay, like, there's contemporary evidence of it. People talked about it. Like, maybe it was overblown, but like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, why? I mean, I do think that there is this, again, I think that there is this interesting desire, and I think here there's a real drive and a pressure for another big bombshell. You know, it hasn't, and what I would say is certainly the reception from the historical community, if you can call us that, which I don't know that you can, has been, let's say, mixed at best.
Yeah. I really haven't seen a single person being like, yes, I wholeheartedly endorse this. It's, you know, it's mostly people being like, well, that'd be kind of cool, I guess. Like, you know.
Yeah, and it's, I think that, I hope that I've done a good job coming across with my thing, which is like, I just don't think we can know one way or another.
Yeah.
And certainly not based on this evidence. I don't think that it's a certain thing that Richard killed his nephews, but at the very least, I can tell you it's a certain thing he wasn't very kind to them.
Yeah.
And what I can tell you with certainty is the Tudors are pricks, and all royals are pricks, and like that, and that absolutely is true. But I am going to be interested to see what Matt has to say about this when his book comes out. But you know, it's interesting because it's certainly not open and shut. You know, they've been trying to say, oh, these are like smoking guns. Here's like all the, you know, we have the receipts, and I just do not think that this is that. And I don't think that historians generally have agreed to say that it is. I think mostly it's kind of interesting, like in a nerdy way. And I think that one thing that it would behoove us all to do as historians is stop trying to swing for the fences. You know, just be like, here's some interesting stuff. Isn't it cool that we have this firsthand account of Richard, who, you know, may or may not have been, you know, Perkin Warbeck. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. Like, I think that's a big, like, the discovery of that document is really cool, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I think you did a great job, and like, I am like on her side as far as being like, here's a new like cool historical theory. And if it ends up being right, well, you know what, good for her. You know, and now she's made at least 2 more than I will ever make. But like, it's just kind of like, all right, man, I guess. Like, sure. I just don't. Yeah, I like. Honestly, the biggest thing that this does is it means that George R. R. Martin's just going to have to go back and he's going to have to rewrite Young Griff instead of being a Blackfire into being a
Targaryen.
An actual Targaryen, and then and then he's still going to get wiped out by Dany, like like what happened to Perkin Warbeck. But what are you going to do? So really, we need to think about how this affects the Winds of Winter.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the real thing. But then again,
if this is true, that also makes his whole like the supposed murder of Bran and Rickon, where they were actually like 2 peasant children that Theon took. That's like the same thing here. Like, oh, we found these bodies, and it's just like 2 peasant kids, and the real guys,
Yeah.
And as we all know, Edward V went on to become a tree wizard god kid and rule the world. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Man, that would be way cooler than what actually happened. I'm sorry. Yeah. Sorry. I just took us off way.
No, that's good. I'm constantly trying to go to A Song of Ice and Fire, so it's a safe space.
Yeah. So that is that's the news on The Princess and the Tower. That's what we got right now. As Eleanor said, there will probably be more on this in the future, just because there's a book to read about it and new info, so we can see what it is. But that's what we got for today. As I said, we got Andor coming on Friday, the first episode there, and next week we're gonna have a mailbag to catch up on some patron questions. So that's what we got now. But Eleanor, what's going on with you? I know you got a new blog out where you talk about how doctors and physicians are not the same thing.
Yes, that's right. So, go check that out over at the blog at going-medieval.com. Basically, I just see a bunch of people yelling about how people with PhDs are not doctors, and yes, they are. Sorry, they
look, as long as we can, as you don't say that lawyers should be called doctors because of the Juris Doctorate, I'm fine with it. But like, if you're taking it there, absolutely not. Lawyers do not need to have that
I mean, it's like
expanded ego. Yeah.
Most medical doctors, it's a courtesy that they are allowed to be called doctor, because unless you have done original research, you aren't one. But whatever. Anyway, I wrote about the history of it. That's fine. Like, I'm not mad about medical doctors being called doctors. What I'm annoyed about is people being like, people who are not medical doctors aren't. Anyway, I explained the history there. And also, it's just very weird that it's like this new thing about like, well, you shouldn't call yourself doctor, and I'm like, but people literally always have been called this, and it's a very new call to stop calling people with PhD doctors.
For me, I'm like, definitions change, language changes. That's just that's just doctor means physician now, colloquially, for the most part. But
and that's fine.
Yeah, but like, why would a person who has studied for years and passed all their exams and theses and all that, why wouldn't they be a doctor?
We were literally doctors the whole time. We never stopped being doctors. Why would we stop anyway? Just because you don't understand what's going on doesn't mean that like the thing that's been happening for 700 years has to stop. Anyway, go read all about it. It'll be fun. I think that I've said this before, but the paperback version of my book, The Once and Future Sex, is going to be out in January in the United States and February in the UK. So if you haven't got your hands on a copy, cheaper versions are going to be available. So you can check that out. They are available for pre-order now. And of course you can find me on the socials, at Going Medieval. I do be dicking around. I'm dicking around. So yeah.
There you go. Yeah. And you guys know where you can find me. Luke is amazing on the stuff. A People's History of the Old Republic is the Star Wars show that I used to do with my buddy Kelsey. You can check it out. It's fun. You might like it if you like hearing me talk in a more scripted manner. you know, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed hearing about this possible theory on the Princess in the Tower. I'm honestly still shocked that she thinks it's Perkin Warbeck. Like, that's crazy to me. I had no idea. Good. That's awesome. I really did learn something new today, and I think that's
there
cool.
you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Yep.
That's cool, yeah. So anyway, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Bye.